In today's episode of the podcast, we are asking, what does it really mean to be Christian? And I actually started this work thanks to my lovely friend Lara from laraeastburn.com. She's an amazing social media, just genius. So if you are a small business owner her particular love is Facebook, but if you are a small business owner who wants some help with your social media, I would invite you to go and check her out, laraeastburn.com. I shall put a link to her website in the show notes. But because she and I have been friends for years now. She's brilliant. However, back in 2014, she and I had a conversation about some of the work that I was wanting to do. And she came up with the hashtag, This Is Christian. And at the time, I released a series of images on Facebook and Instagram, challenging some of the ideas of what it really means to be Christian. And so, for example, at the time, and I don't remember the specifics, but there was a store in the US that they were doing something very not Christian. They were like, it was something, you're probably going to be listening to this going, oh yeah, I remember what that is, particularly if you're American. There was a store in the US and there was something to do with birth control or women, and I can't remember the details, but it was really full on. And so I released, by way of example, to tie in with that, I released an image challenging, actually, do you know what? We can be Christian and still use birth control, for example. And as I'm talking, I'm just trying to bring up the hashtag on Instagram to see if any of those original images still exist. Because that would make it so much easier than me having to remember off the top of my head. And yes, absolutely, I would have been a good idea to do that beforehand. But if you remember, if you've been listening along for a while, you might remember me telling you that I launched the Faith and Business podcast at a really stupid time. I launched the Faith and Business podcast at the start of the school summer holidays. And my argument has always been that that the way we show up in life just by being ourselves. It's not about everything being polished and correct and perfect all the time. And so I live by that. I do try very hard, for example, just to say what's really going on in my head rather than putting a brave face on stuff. Because I think the more that people can just show up and be themselves and be real about what's going on, the easier it would be. And one of the biggest challenges is thinking that everybody else has got stuff together and we haven't. So as I'm saying all of this, and this just ties in with that. And I actually have, while I've been talking this through, I have been able to find some of those images. So, for example, there was a photograph at the time of, it's only the end of his face, but it was he looks sort of Arab with a big beard. And so the caption on that said, loving and respecting people who don't look the same as us, this is Christian. And so the whole point of that series was to challenge the way that we show up in the world. Because unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons why I did and still do, although I'm getting better at it, one of the reasons why I struggle with that label Christian is because of the negative connotations. If you were to ask most people out on the street, they would say that Christians are all about judgment, and being afraid of people who don't look like us is one example of that. I've got another example from that series is a picture of a child with very messy hands. When I grown up as a kid in church, children were meant to be really quiet. You weren't meant to express yourself. You weren't meant to be too noisy. And don't get me wrong, I understand that we need to be able to hear what's going on, but there's a difference between rowdy, crazy nonsense and just children being children. And, Jesus said, let the little children come unto me. So Jesus loved children. And so I think it's time to start challenging some of those stereotypes. And so I am going to bring back, somebody else has been using it, which is great, that hashtag, This Is Christian. I'm going to start sharing some of those images again. And so I'd invite you, the call to action in this episode, or the call to arms, but it is the call to action. The call to action in this episode is, I'd love it if you start sharing it too. Because like I've been saying in the previous episodes, this isn't just about me standing up there saying stuff. I want us to build a community. I want us to build together so that we can together rise up and reclaim what it means to be Christian. And so if you are on Instagram or Facebook, you can use it on Twitter too, for that matter. There's hashtags there. I only mentioned Facebook and Instagram because that's what I prefer. But that I would invite you to start using that hashtag, This is Christian, particularly if you're sharing stuff that challenges some of those stereotypes, because we can make a difference. Sometimes it feels like we don't make a difference. Sometimes it feels like, we're the only ones who are trying. And so if we could come together around that hashtag, and come together around this idea of reclaiming what it means to be Christian, it will help us individually not to feel so alone, because we are together making up that bride of Christ, the church, like we talked about yesterday, us coming together. And so I would really invite you, start thinking and start looking out for those examples of what it means to you to be Christian in the year 2019, those examples of love in the year 2019. And what's really nice, what I get very geeky about the brain science stuff, as some of you listening will know. The way that your brain works, thanks to the reticular activating system, which is a little part of your brain at the back of your head, it acts as a filter. And one of the things it does, it filters in things that it deems important to you. So the lovely thing is that the more that you start looking for examples of positive examples of what it means to be Christian, the more you will see them. And so actually by actively looking for them and actively starting to share them, you are signaling to your brain that is important to you. And so your brain will help you out, and your brain will start showing you more and more of these examples. Okay. So that's my invitation to you in this episode. That's my call to action, if you like, is if this stuff that what we've been talking about over the last couple of days resonates with you, I would invite you to start joining in that conversation. If you're ready to go even deeper, I actually do have a Facebook group as well, and I'll put a link to the Facebook group in the show notes. It's called the Faith and Business Playground, which because the website is the Faith and Business Playground as well. So you can search for it on Facebook and you'll find it, but I will put a link to it in the show notes. And that's where we actually have some of these conversations. We have some of those conversations and start digging into it a little bit deeper. But that very first step, start looking for those positive examples of what it means to be Christian in the year 2019, because I've got to believe they are out there. I know that they are out there. They are out there in your life. So look for those examples and start sharing them, if you would, so we can come together and reclaim what it means to be Christian in the year 2019. As ever, thank you for listening. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do consider subscribing, faithandbusinessplayground.com/listen. And if you are an entrepreneur who has a project that you want help with, Rent-A-Boss is for you. faithandbusinessplayground.com/talk, where you can arrange a time for the two of us to have a conversation to see how I might support you in getting that project finally done in 90 days. I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.